this is another fishing podcast. I'm sure you're aware, but you're not aware yet of how exciting this podcast is going to be because I have Thomas Allen. Now, Thomas, I did a little bit of research on your career. You are a digital content manager at In-Fisherman, correct? And co-host of In-Fisherman TV. That is right. I have that. That's your official titles.
Nailed it. Yeah. And among other things, I have been known to fix the sink, and I know how to push a broom. So I'm not above any of it.
Love it. Well, this is going to be exciting because we worked, I guess it was back in 2021, we actually first worked together, but now we're working together more, which is fantastic. We both have a real passion for fishing. So when you meet someone like that, and we have a similar background too, and we're in media and fishing. So I've been wanting to do this podcast for a while, and Thomas has been wanting to do it. So we both want to do this podcast. We're doing this podcast. You're coming along. Let's go.
This isn't another fishing podcast. This is another fishing podcast.
Wow, what an intro. My goodness gracious. Okay.
You nailed that. That was pretty good.
Thank you. It's, I come from a kind of a traditional video production background, and none of that is really cool to do anymore. That kind of a flamboyant, very charismatic open, I don't know that you need to do that anymore. If you look at like YouTube, it's just everybody's falling over and knocking over tripods and making mistakes constantly, and they get like millions and millions of views. And so I think the least professional you can make all this stuff, the better. And that's why I went totally overboard in my basement here with a studio to make it totally professional.
Well, the question I have is, what's with the Hams beer sweatshirt? I mean, I'm kind of thinking like Old Milwaukee Light level. Isn't that Hams beer quality?
Well, I am my favorite actually.
Right away.
Yeah, no, my favorite domestic light beer is actually Coors Light. Hams is more about, it's a Minnesota pride thing, I think, more than anything. Hams started in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I just get this nostalgic kind of feeling. Even, going up in your neck of the woods, Brainerd, like these taverns, like these lake taverns, and they have that faded.
A lot of them have those signs.
Say that again?
A lot of them have those signs up. I mean, it seems to be I don't know how you'd put it, almost like well, nostalgic is the word, but it's like there's an element of pride of associating with that brand, and it doesn't matter if the beer's garbage or not. It's a cool brand, and whenever you see the name, I kind of chuckle a little bit. I would say another thing we have in common is if I was to, pick a beer at Buffalo Wild Wings, it'd probably be Coors Light. I don't drink a lot of beer, but I do like light beers. Now, that said, here in the north in the winter, you have your PBR, you have your Old Milwaukee, and especially in Minnesota, your Grain Belt. I think Grain Belt is a fantastic beer.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'm not on the IPA train. Like, I don't do that. I could give a rip about IPAs. I think people drink them to say they drink them, and not anybody likes them. I like Coors Light. I like premium. So, yeah.
The thing about too, like when I not to go into my life story, no one needs to hear that, but I was born in Minnesota, worked different places, and came back to Minnesota, like in I guess it was late 2009, and the Grain Belt, like the premium, having that for the first time, coming back to Minnesota, because I was actually I started my drinking career on Busch Light. And so, like having a premium, I was like, this is a really interesting taste and has a very unique taste. And I was like, I really like this beer. It's when you're drinking a premium, it's got a very unique taste, but you know what I mean? Yeah. But the other thing too is, what I was going to lose let's get back to Hams. The whole thing about Hams, which is so funny, is that like everything, Hams got bought out a long time ago. and it has no, it's like it's not, there's no connection at all really to Minnesota anymore. It's I think it's made, it's like Miller owns it or something, some Wisconsin brand now. So you know, I try not to get too caught up on, you know, here's what it is. I'm going to be nostalgic no matter what. I don't even drink hams, but I like just the culture of like the old school hams, the land of sky blue waters, the hearkening back to, you know, earlier times, simpler times. And you know, that's why I like it. It reminds me of simpler times.
If they drain the last little bit of hams out of the factory, out of the distillery, whatever the heck they use, I don't care, to make the beer, I think they'd have a reputable brand, just because, you know, it's Ham's beer. I think everybody in the country, every tailgate drinking backwoods country boy knows what Ham's is. They may not have ever drank it before, but it being a Minnesota special, I can see how you have a little nostalgic connection to it. So it's definitely not something I would make fun of somebody for, but there's always a jab that's worth being thrown out there when you see that brand. But I mean, deep down, we all like, yeah, I can appreciate that. If it tastes like crap, I'm gonna drink it anyway because it's a cool brand.
Yeah, exactly. So we probably shouldn't talk about beers the whole time, but I mean, we probably could, but there's a lot of stuff that we need to get into. And today I'm really trying to look at this camera right here more, because I have a tendency, I've noticed, to be looking down at the computer screen when I'm doing these, when I got to be looking up at the audience. So I apologize to the huge, massive audience that has been complaining about that. I will look at the lens more today. That's what I'm really gonna concentrate on, because the reason I look, I'm like a dog that sees squirrels out like side or something outside the window. There's movement on my computer, so I just look at it, and so I need to be focused on the lens right here. But anyways, Thomas, I'm excited you're here. We've talked about this, you know, doing a podcast for a while. We first started working together in, it was 2021, I believe, and it was a muskie shoot that we were trying to put together. It was real late in the year. It didn't work out, but I really felt like we hit it off. We have a mutual love of the outdoors, specifically fishing. You have a really great knowledge of fishing. You're plugged in to fishing. You're right there right now. It looks like you're at the headquarters of In-Fisherman.
Yeah. We are. So the classic In-Fisherman facility is still open, and we work out of this office here in Brainerd. But as things go in the outdoor industry, there has been years of downsizing, and really, you know, this is a tangent we could go down, but you know, there was a long time where people said that magazines were going to go away, and that people no longer wanted tangible paper reading materials. And as time has gone on, we found that to be completely false. And probably what saved In-Fisherman. In fact, our subscriptions are increasing. We are growing as a brand, but a lot of that is the association that we have under the umbrella of Outdoor Sportsman Group, which is everything In-Fisherman, but that also includes the Outdoor Channel. It includes, I'm forgetting the number, but I think 17 or 18 other titles, which would include your Game and Fish publication, North American Whitetail, Peterson's Hunting, Wildfowl, Bird Dog, or Gun Dog, sorry, and shooting titles you would recognize, such as Guns and Ammo. And we have a pretty robust portfolio of outdoor publications. And while each of these independently are not large money-making facilities, I'll shut that down. I don't need that to go off again.
No, it's totally all right. That's what happens in podcasts.
That's right. We keep it rough around the edges. Anyway, for the fact that we have a group of sister publications is probably what's kept our brand afloat. And of course, each of the brands that are successful have a TV show and other forms of media, like social media, a digital platform, a website. And then, you know, here recently we've started a podcast here. So where we're sitting is the West Wing, if you will, of In-Fisherman headquarters. And I pulled out a section of cubes here because this building used to home anywhere from 70 to 80 people, I think, in the heyday. And it's a little quieter now. There's 4 or 5 or 6 of us that work here on a regular basis. So we had this whole half of the building that just was being used for storage and this, that, or the other thing. And with this podcast dream that I'd had to get going at In-Fisherman, we turned a portion of this room into, I don't like to use the word studio because it's not padded foamed walls and it's not soundproof, and we got people that walk in once in a while, but I guess that's the essence of a podcast, is spontaneous. So funny story though, yes, here at the In-Fisherman headquarters there's a lot of furniture, but none of it is really creature comfort or where you could sit for a long period of time. It's the kind of table and chair I'm sitting in now. It's office stuff. Well, we have this is a funny thing, almost got me in trouble. Sure could have got me in trouble. We have a Habitat for store here in Brainerd. It's called
You kind of cut out there a little bit.
And I thought,
can you hear me? You cut out there a little bit.
Did I? Okay.
Yeah, say that one more time. The last 20 seconds.
Yeah, can you?
I think you're all right.
Okay.
It's just
so we have a store here in Brainerd. Are you losing me again?
No, you're okay.
Okay. All right. I'll pick it up. So here in Brainerd, we have a Habitat for Humanity store that sells old furniture. It's called The Restore. And this almost got me in trouble. I probably had some help from Todd, my publisher, saving my butt. But I went in and found we have a futon, which is your classic bachelor pad type piece of furniture. We have matching chairs. You can kind of see this one back here a little bit. We have 2 of those that come with matching pillows. And then I got a little love seat, and all 3 of these pieces of furniture clash terribly. I mean, it's ugly. And I think that's the point, right? We wanted to have something that A, you could sit on, it was comfortable, B, didn't break the bank, but then C, it's hideous. And so that's where we're at. We're in the podcast studio here at In-Fisherman headquarters. And we have been doing a podcast. I think we're 20 or so episodes in. And there's still some parts we have to get figured out to make it all work on our digital platforms, but they're everywhere that you go to consume podcasts. So
yeah, in fact, I actually was able to check that out yesterday. We were doing a shoot up in Brainerd at, it was a kayak shoot. It was actually more of a kayak trolling motor shoot, to be more specific, but we were doing the shoot behind the headquarters there, and I got to tell you, it was a little bit like, I felt like Charlie in the Chocolate Factory a little bit, like that kind of, it's just kind of hallowed ground, like it just, I have such a love for that organization. It was, growing up, that passion I had, that early passion I had for fishing was just stoked from In-Fisherman Media. It was first, I think it was probably, I don't remember if it was first the television show that I saw that I was like, what is this? Or my buddy might have told me about it, and then I started watching In-Fisherman television, those 1 hour long specials that they did. And then it was the magazine. I can't remember which was first, but the magazine, it was just, it for a fisherman, it was everything, and then the fact that it was in the state that I lived in, so I had pride in that, and so it was all that, like In-Fisherman, I really, it played a huge role in just kind of, this might sound a little bit cheesy, but it kind of making me who I was, or who I am.
For sure.
And,
absolutely.
Yeah, and I tried to get an internship with In-Fisherman right out of college, and I remember harassing Jim Lindner. This is before they sold it, the Lindner sold it, but I just kept harassing Jim Lindner. I finally got a hold of him, and he sounded so tired. I think he'd just gotten off the road, and I was like, that was probably my first kind of real indication of like what, fishing video production is like. It's just listening to how exhausted James Lindner, James, does he prefer one or the other? I don't know, but he just was, he was just absolutely exhausted. So now I get it, those real long road trips and you're trying to get a lot of stuff done. But my point in that is that I've just been, for me, it's the pinnacle of what I wanted to do in my career. So it's really cool just to be working with you, doing this right now, and then, just seeing you where you're at there in right there, we're doing this like, at the headquarters. That's pretty darn cool. And seeing your backdrop, yesterday, seeing what you had put together just for a podcast setting, you heard me just, I was just super excited about what you had made there. So I'm all for your vision there.
Well, it's a work in progress. We've used this studio a handful of times, not nearly as much as I'd like, but I also have a portable kit that allows us to take these out on the road. So if we, for example, we went to Andy Meyer's Lodge in Ontario this year to film a muskie segment, and sat down with Steve Herbeck and a good friend of mine, Steve Jonasy, who's an Iowa muskie guide, and then Julian, who owns a resort now. And having that opportunity to sit down to take the podcast element to their comfortable areas, I think, is a neat component. You can see a lot of that stuff, where we have our podcast situated. But this room is going to be used a lot in coming months, especially as winter sets in here. Ultimately, I'd like to record a couple times a week. But enough about this thing. We'll dig into that later down the road. But you said something that's very true. Life, and I was a very young guy. I was born in Wisconsin and learned about In-Fisherman after we had left Wisconsin. And that's a long story, but I was ate up with fishing going into fourth grade. Like the fourth grade and under was every time I would go fishing, it was just life-changing for me. I couldn't get enough of it. And it always ended too soon. It seems like a lot of our fishing trips, no matter where you're going, you're like, oh man, it's time to go home, got to get back to work. And that's just the nature of the life we live. But I didn't want that. I didn't want to just be begging for the weekend and be living for the days to go fishing. I was like, I don't know what direction I need. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew I did not want to have to work. And when I say work, like I work more now than I ever have, but I wasn't sure what I wanted. Well, we moved from Wisconsin to Iowa. I think I'm jumping ahead of you here, getting into some history, but
no. This is exactly what I was going to ask you next.
So when we moved to Iowa, I had a hard time. I had left all the friends I had at home in Wisconsin. And at that age, you have good friends, you have best friends, you have, bike buddies and you're setting off fireworks and old ladies, mailboxes, stuff you shouldn't be doing. And it was not easy transition for me. And Dad knew that I was struggling. And so within the first year of us being where we were at, he bought me an In-Fisherman tape, a VHS cassette tape. And like to this day, that is my introduction to outdoor media. And it was a classic, like the greatest hits type thing. It had Al's Big Pike on it. It had the Catfish Fever segment, not the whole tape of Catfish Fever, but, bits and pieces. And it had Doug waiting for walleyes at night, and a section with Doug Hannon down in Florida catching giant bass on shiners. Like there was a lot of different components to it. And I played the wheels off that tape, Greg. I could not get enough of it. And I think when I first invested in the time it took to watch it, the very first time, I knew that's what I want to do. And that's a pipe dream. It really is. I mean, this industry is not easy to break into. You have to be cautious about making your passion your career. That's not for everybody. But I was so into fishing. I knew that some way, somehow I had to do what the Linders were doing. And I didn't think at the time that I would ever be here. That was not my intention. In fact, much like you, I went the production route. I ran camera for people. I'm pretty good with editing software and video equipment and writing. Writing was my big thing. I've been writing for almost 20 years, probably 20 years now. And so that was kind of the staple of my way into media. But if you follow deer hunting, and we have a brand, North American Whitetail, there's a guy that's been on that television show for many years. He's a whitetail idol of mine. His name is good Lord Thomas. I just lost it. I had to tip my tongue. Stan Potts. If you watch whitetail hunting on TV, you know the name Stan Potts. Well, he wrote an article that appeared in North American Whitetail years and years ago, but it was I was at that age, Greg, where I was trying to figure out how to do this, what I wanted to do, how I was going to get there. And I read this article, and he wrote about being in outdoor media. And not only good, but masterful at all elements of media at the current time, anticipating what is coming next down the pike, which, back in those days would have been social media, would have been the website, the digital side of things. But being able to adapt and roll with the punches. And I was like, man, that's kind of a tall order, but I guess if I want to do this, it's the way I have to be. And so somewhere in that 2006, I started writing in 2004 or 5 is when I first started doing that. But I had been filming my whitetail hunt since 1998. So as my junior year in high school, I was trying to film whitetail hunts, and it didn't work for a long time. It took us 3 years to get one on film. And if I showed you that first hunt, it's embarrassing as hell. But it still happened. But that my contributions to the industry have been in just about 20 years. So I look back on that and knowing how ate up I was with fishing and what I wanted to do, that's where it started. But you want to know where the storytelling got kicked off? This is a tip of the hat to my dad, although it's kind of a ball busting joke between him and I too, because we moved from the first place that we lived in Iowa. I think we spent a couple years there. Then we moved out into the farm country of eastern Iowa, and there was I use this term for this conversation, but there was a creek that ran through the woods and a cornfield down from our house by, I'd say, half a mile, and it wasn't real big. You could literally flip across it, but it was full of fish. It had carp, it had gar, there were some smallmouth, some walleyes, but primarily catfish. And whenever I would go, I learned how to fish that because of the catfish fever video, right? So In-Fisherman educated me how to ply that river. Well, my dad never believed me when I came back and told him how many fish I caught. He's like, whatever, 25. Yeah, I don't think so. He's not buying it. So I started buying those little disposable Kodak cameras. You remember those?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I would take 3 of those with me and fill up 2 of them on almost every trip. And the amount of money my parents spent to get my stuff
developed.
What do we do? Developed. God, that's
we haven't used that word in so long. That's the funny thing. Remember how exciting it would be when you would take all those pictures and then you'd take them to wherever you had to take them to get developed. And then it was the anticipation. Oh my God, I can't wait to see what this picture looks like. It's something that no one really thinks about
that way.
What's that?
I had trail cameras that were filmed like back in the day, and that was the same thing. I mean, I was going through a whole roll of film. If the wind was blowing the wrong way, you'd fill up a roll of film just on a stick blowing. Things have changed. The digital age has its benefits for sure. But anyway, so my father, not necessarily believing my fish stories, if you will, turned me into a curator. And anytime I had to produce some type of writing work for school in English or literature or whatever, I don't know why, it's just God-given, I guess. I did well. And I would always get A's and, high grades, high scores for any type of writing work because it was always going to be centered around hunting or fishing. And Dad's always told me, he's like, you need to be a writer. You need to share these stories because there are elements of, and I laugh today when I'm in a situation and I'm like, that's a good part of the story. If I ever tell this story, that has to be included. And it's really what motivated me to write, because I don't think I had an intention to become an expert and educate. I still probably wouldn't consider myself at that, but I wanted to share stories because what In-Fisherman did so well back in the day, you remember the videos, the all the different species, and they did a good job of telling the story of the experience as much as educating you on how to do it.
Absolutely.
And I feel like we've gotten away from that. I feel like the way we consume media today digitally is very fast. We want it immediate. We want entertained, and the opposite's true as well. Elon Musk has said it recently that you don't necessarily need a college degree. Everything's available online for free. That's true if you know how to use that. But I did not finish college. That's a long story. You would think to be a writer or an editor, you would need to have a college degree, and I would certainly recommend it. I have 3/4 of a degree. Long story, but I was in the military. We got activated to go to Iraq. I dropped out of college, ended up not going for various reasons, and then ended up trying to go back to school 2 different times. It didn't work out. So for me to break into the industry in the writing side of things and really filming too, without a degree, that wasn't an easy thing to accomplish. And I didn't ever think otherwise. I was like, I'm doing this. I'm going to write. I'm going to submit work. I'm going to get published, build a byline. I'm going to roll cameras. I'm going to, film other people. And you probably get this a lot too, with a lot of the folks you film. Like when I'm filming or filmed a lot in those early days, I was like, man, I would have done that different. I would have said that different. Or I guess I picked up on some of the mistakes that the people I was filming, who frankly, a lot of them had no business being in front of the camera at all. But I knew that being the guy behind the camera was a less desirable job, which would be in more demand. So ultimately, my way into the business, a lot like yours, I'm guessing, is doing a lot of the grunt work, writing and filming and editing and doing all this and that, which inevitably prepared me to work on the other side of the camera. And I didn't take this job with the intention of hosting In-Fisherman TV, Greg, at all. That was not my goal. But to think that that's where I've ended up, and there's a big gap in there I didn't go through, but it's a dream come true. It's a dream job. It really is. But
no doubt.
Anybody, you aren't just go fishing all the time. There is no job like that.
Right. No. And so what do you kind of, would you say was your, the real, what's a good way to the moment that things really broke for you? Like that one moment that stands out to you, that this got me on the path to where you wanted to go?
Well, interestingly, it was, I took a fall. It would have been like 2004, 2005 time frame. And I went out on the second day of Iowa's bow season and shot the first buck that came by. And I knew that if I had that tag in my pocket, I would not sacrifice my tree stand time to film other people. So I did. October 2nd, drilled a nice deer on public land. Getting it out of there was another story my wife is still sore about. We almost got lost in the woods. But I did that, and as a result, I filmed all fall. And I'm using a handy cam. I mean, a little bitty mini DV handy cam that I think cost, and we could barely afford it. It was like $120 at Radio Shack or some crazy thing back in the day. But I filmed 8 hunts that fall. I had no idea where they were going to go. And they ranged from small deer to big deer to does to archery hunting to gun hunting to muzzleloader hunting to all that stuff. And there was a group in Iowa that had just started. And this was in the day, this was the heyday of monster bucks and Primos and the Drury Outdoors crew, where I would wait in line at Walmart every July to buy those videos. I would, wish they had a subscription service, because they could have just got delivered to my house, but I had to go to Walmart knowing when they were going to release those tapes, and I bought them. Well, how do you break into that? I had no idea. I wasn't in the know with the Drurys or Michael Waddell and Monster Bucks. I had no idea how that was going to work. So just so happened that a group in Iowa started called Real Hunting, and I still keep in touch with these guys to this day. I sent them a note. I don't remember how I heard about them. I was at the Deer Classic, and they had a booth. They were going to submit your videos, and we'll put you on our hunting tape. Well, I reached out and I said, I got 8 hunts. I'll send you guys all the footage. You can chop them up, edit them together, and put them on the first edition of Real Hunting. Well, they used, I think, 6 or 7 of my hunts. A couple of them were pretty trashy. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing back in those days. So, to have that much publication at that point in time was a big deal for me. And at the Deer Classic that following year, when they were going to release the DVD, they wanted to have a small magazine to go with it. And I'm talking like a 16 to 20 page thing. I mean, it was more of a pamphlet. And they knew that I wanted to write. I didn't know that I was going to write, but they said, hey, why don't you make us this magazine? I'm like, I don't know anything about that. And so I did. I wrote like 6 or 7 stories and took a bunch of pictures, some on film, some digital, and ended up producing this Iowa Real Hunting big buck magazine thing that lasted for, I think we did 2 versions of it. But it's a lot of work, and we didn't stick to it. But so that was kind of it, where I realized, okay, what I heard from Stan Potts talking about being good at all this stuff, Michael Waddell, who's a name we're all familiar with if you love whitetail hunting, he made his mark as a videographer. So my thought was, if I want to work in the business, that's what I was going to have to do. And so I learned to film, and I still film. I film turkey hunts. I got to brag. I have the best turkey hunts on YouTube. I promise. If you go watch some of them, you can tell me different, but I bet you don't.
Tell people how they get to your YouTube channel.
It's Outdoor Pursuits. So I don't know what the link is, but if you just search Thomas Allen hunting, you'll find it. But those videos are watched by about 150 people. So I could use the views.
Well, one thing's for sure, quality is not important on. So if you think that it's all about quality, and you're like, why the hell? In fact, I think it's better to just put out absolute junk more often than not on YouTube. That's kind of controversial. I don't necessarily mean that. What's most important with YouTube is consistency, which is what I've been terrible about. But quality.
Yeah, me too. But what's interesting is it's the medium that you consume it on that dictates the quality. I think that if you're watching anything on the internet, anything that's YouTube driven or streamed, like I believe there's leeway in there for some not as well done material. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you're watching television, it has to be perfect. It has to be timed right to allow for commercial slots. And there's a lot of art and work that goes into producing TV that because you've done a lot of filming. But when it comes to digital stuff, the same person that sits in the same chair on the same TV and watches YouTube accepts the garbage. And sometimes it's bad, but sometimes that makes it good because it's so rough and ragged. Otherwise, if you go over to a football game, you don't want to see any of that garbage. So you consume it differently. And that's the weird our society right now.
I think what people are really like thirsting for is just authenticity,
Yes.
And so that's what YouTube really provides. There's a lot of garbage. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of people that aren't genuine on YouTube, like they're just trying to, and I'm not going to act like I've been trying to, figure out the algorithm and I've been through all that nonsense. I'm old school video production. So it's been very, very difficult for me to wrap my head around everything that was happening, especially when, earlier on YouTube, I was just like, these people just blowing up, and I'm like looking at their stuff, and I'm like, what? This is home video. Yeah. Like that, no one knows these kids, and they're just blowing. I couldn't wrap my head around it. So it's been a real, there's been a lot of trials and tribulations there. But I think what it comes down to is just like generally it's people want that kind of authenticity. They go to YouTube for that. Just raw stuff, and it's you can have really great high end stuff on there too, so it's not just that. But I think just in general it is more where people can just kind of get the straight dope on stuff, or at least feel that it's more authentic in that regard. But there's some stuff that it's just so raw. I just like I can't get into it. I guess that's just because I kind of was brought up on that more produced stuff.
Well, I was too, but you're right. The word is authentic, and to use an example, there's a couple things, and I don't have any problem saying this on any platform, but in the fishing space, if we refer to somebody as a Guggen, that's not a compliment, and a lot of that raw, unfiltered stuff that the Guggen kids put out, I don't think they're doing it as much, or it's different, or maybe it's evolved a little bit. That was hard to watch. There's just a lot of it stuff I didn't agree with, the demeanors, the whatever. And I'm not friends with any of these guys. And frankly, I'm open to having a conversation with them, but I don't care for the type of content they put out back in the day, or how they managed to collect their audience, which is a whole nother story for another day. But what I do like is if you go over to the hunting side, you have the hunting public, who is a group of young guys that are at different phases in life. They're largely single. I know that Aaron, one of the head dudes, is married, and they're able to hunt a lot, but they do this public hunting thing, and the editing is really raw. They have small angles of quality they've included, like wireless mics and how they've set up their manual zoom. And there are things, manual zoom, manual focus, things like that, that do take the experience and make it better, but it's still very raw, right? So I think they're doing an incredible job, and that's an example of where we're at as a community, as an outdoor space, that there's room for good stuff, and there's a continued demand for better stuff. So if you've got a great way, and really what real hunting, really what the hunting public does is they tell the story. I think that's what I like about their, they'll if they're in a turkey hunt, for example, they'll walk out to where the turkey was, where it got shot, and they'll point back, well, we were sitting over here against that tree. And there's a little nugget of information you can take with you. It's entertaining, there's education, and then on the flip side, it's engaging. So all that to me is the definition of authenticity. And if you can accomplish that in a video online without a lot of cool transitions and edits and not a lot of shameless plugs for quote unquote wannabe sponsors, like, then you're onto something. And that can work fishing or hunting. But that's a good example of what is, I think, a good result of the digital age. And those guys have changed the hunting business. So there's some good stuff that happens out there.
Yeah, no doubt. And I agree. I wanted to get back to a little bit just to, you had said that you didn't complete college. And I went through the college process, and it took a few more years than maybe, 4. It took more than 4 years, but we got
They're called doctors.
Yeah. And so I got a broadcasting degree, and I got to tell you, when I got a job with Bass Pro Shops Video Productions, my boss, somehow I got that job. I was very, very tenacious. I'm going to want to ask you too, some tips that you would give anybody who's younger who wants to try to break into the industry. What I would say, be tenacious. Be tenacious, but not to a point where they want to kill you, and they don't. You want to pursue, but not to a point where you are a pest. Right up to the point that you're a pest is what you want to.
You got to recognize that before you get there, though.
Yeah, and so I just remember my boss. I got my foot in there though, and then he liked me, thank God, and I was able to. I interned for him, and then I got a job, but my boss would just constantly, I remember he's like, you don't know anything. You didn't learn anything in college. And it's true, broadcasting, my college was so bad when I think about it. Like, I did not learn anything that I really needed to about broadcasting from my college. And it wasn't like, thankfully, I was spoiled and my grandpa paid for my college. But I'm telling you, it's not something that is absolutely necessary. In fact, I think it would be better to just kind of get away from that model. But my boss, who in many respects was, I'll put it this way, he was a very, very interesting guy. Okay, I'm trying to. He could be very hard on me at sometimes, and he had a lot of very interesting idiosyncrasies, but it was absolutely 100. I wouldn't have been hired if I didn't have that diploma. So there are those people out there that are just that are like that. I don't agree with that whatsoever. But I just remember that, like, gee whiz, thank God I did it, because this particular guy, I tried to get work with In-Fisherman with Jim Lindner, but they weren't looking for an internship, so I went the Bass Pro Shop route. I've always loved Bass Pro Shops, and that worked out. But that boss of mine, that first boss, he was like, nope, you got to have that diploma, and it's just everything. It's all dependent. There's different ways. Don't let that be a deterrent. You just got to be tenacious and go after it, young people out there in the world. And Thomas, what do you have any advice? Like, what, because it is interesting. Like, the good thing about podcasts is that they are able, I didn't have anything like this growing up, this real behind the scenes to kind of give people an idea of what it's really like. So the fact that you made it in, what would you say?
The hard way. I wished there have been a lot of situations I wished I'd have finished school And I kind of used my career growth to develop the skill set that I have now for writing. And I wouldn't recommend this. I don't think it's necessarily the right way to go. When it comes to a skill like writing, it doesn't matter what kind of God-given talent you have. You need to refine that through education, experience, and there's no better way to get better at writing than to write and have somebody critically go through your writing. And in the early days when I started selling articles, which largely was to Game and Fish, and there's a Iowa Sportsman magazine I worked on. That's another part of my story down the road. That whenever I got the finished work back, I would read it next to my original manuscript and be like, oh, they changed this, they changed that. And that, it taught me to be open to criticism, because when you send something into an editor, they reserve the right to put red ink on your work, and you have to be okay with that. You can't get offended if someone changes your work because they paid for it. They got to change it to make it fit their format, no matter how much it hurts your feelings. So you can't get butthurt or be upset about that. So, I would go back and finish school if that's something that I could change. But I think part of that is pride. Part of that is that's one of the things I didn't finish. And I'm just not wired to work. I was newly married, so was learning what that was all about, and I'm not wired to work full time and go to school full time. Like I was not. I maybe am more capable now, but not then. So I had to work, and I worked hard. But I'm along the same lines as you. Before we get into like advice to breaking into the industry, is that school is not necessary in life, and that doesn't mean you're a bum and you sit on your couch and nurse entitlements to the end. That's not what I'm saying. But as an example, my son is a junior in high school and is a very hard worker. He's very motivated by seeing a project through. He's very driven by the end result, and has zero problems getting his hands dirty, working on his knees, or doing stuff that most people aren't going to want to do. And I asked him early on, and this is the question you have to ask yourself: is what do you want in life? If you want to be a billionaire, you better be a genius. You better be the Elon Musks of the world, or whatever. I've used his name twice in this podcast now.
Fanning out. We got a fanboy here. Just kidding. I'm kind of a fan myself.
Yeah, he's a smart cat. But my son is not going to go the route of school. He's going to go the route of being in the trades, largely because he knows what he wants. And when I asked him that question, he said, I want to own land. I want to own a boat. Two things that are very expensive, that are not easy to come by. And I said, well, a good way to not acquire those things are to have massive amounts of school debt. And I think that you'll see where I'm going with this. I'm going to bring this all together for you, because we are ranting and raving about something that's not necessarily directly related to hunting and fishing. You do have to have a degree for certain elements of a career path. If you want to be an engineer, if you want to design lures, if you want to be able to operate a CAD system to design a fishing reel spool, or these are definite skills that you're only going to learn through a college education and then post-grad experience. So, I'm not saying don't go the route to school, but what I am saying is you don't necessarily have to. And if your goals in life are to raise a family, to maintain a good quality income, and you're willing to work hard, and you're not above doing the trades, for example, carpentry, plumbing, HVAC, welding, etc., goes on, and you enjoy working hard and seeing the fruits of your labor, then don't go to school. Figure out a way to work in the trades. What I will tell you with my career path and the way that I went, Greg, is it made my life really hard for a while. I had to go to the school of hard knocks, to use a term that we're familiar with, our generation. And it was a slow, tedious process. It cost me and my family a lot of money. I made a lot of mistakes. I didn't always do stuff the right way. I have a bit of a temper, if you haven't picked up on that yet. So I have a tendency to, if I'm by myself, and I will go to the garage and on my lungs and say a lot of really bad words, because it makes me feel better. But when it comes to this industry,
I want to cut you off just a little bit, and hopefully you don't lose your temper that I'm cutting you off, because we are actually very similar.
Oh, you're good.
I've picked it up. I'm like, yeah, we have a similar temperament, and it's just kind of like, it's kind of nice to know that, Like sometimes some of my behavior, I'm like, God dang it, man. But then I'm also like,
I'm such a child sometimes.
but part of it is just, I
Recognize
think, part of it's being a male too, though.
right.
It's so I'm gonna blame it also on my gender, or is it sex? I don't know. Let's not get into that topic. But I understand what you're saying. Anyway, I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good. I mean, I think that my personality flaws, which are many, probably helped move me forward. They helped me chase down paychecks when I wasn't getting them. I did freelance for 5 years, and that was a very difficult time. But I did make my way up in this industry. But Greg, the biggest thing, the most important thing, there are two components that I cannot put enough value on. Number one is the people and relationships you have. The people, being open to getting to know new people, being open to these people educating you and helping you pave the way to success. I have numbers of people, and my story is incomplete without mentioning Tommy Scarless. Tommy Scarless, who is a legendary walleye pro, passed away recently to brain cancer, and left a giant hole in this industry. And he's one of my favorite people, but he found me at some very low points in my career, recognized talent that could benefit his future and the future of walleye fishing, and we created a relationship. And I say that because I had intended to work in hunting. My passion was in whitetails and turkeys and archery and muzzleloaders. Like, that's really what gets me out of bed in the morning. But I had a goal to be a career outdoor media communicator. And you know what? Tommy Scarless turned me towards fishing. Now, I love to fish. Don't get me wrong. Like, I was fully engaged in fishing bass tournaments and following the sport, and I loved muskies. So like, I was pursuing it and aware of it. But Tommy turned me into the career side of fishing. And I don't think that I'd go back. There's a lot of drama in fishing, and there's a lot of drama in hunting. I don't think you can get away from that. But the other thing is authenticity. There was my first, so I did the real hunting gig, where I did videos for a couple of years and worked on that small magazine. And then I started writing for the Iowa Sportsman magazine. And that would have been, I guess, the local competition to Iowa Game and Fish back when the Game and Fish publications had their state specific magazines. But what turned me into an editor is when they would send me magazines after they were published. More than once, this kind of thing happened where I wrote a muskie story and they put pike pictures in it.
Oh, good.
And I was like, what is going on? I continually hounded the publisher there about accuracy, but I was always polite. And this goes back to the relationships of what I was talking about. I was always polite, but direct. I'm like, bro, you put a pike in my muskie story, and it's published. We can't fix this. And I think there was 5 or 6 of those conversations. And he called me. He's like, do you want a job? I was like, at the time I was working in a sheet metal shop at a fabricator and, doing seamless gutters, and, it was a gig, it was all right. I didn't hate it, but, I was like, hold on, I don't have a degree. I know how to write, but I'm not like refined. But what you want to give me a job as a magazine editor? And thank you, Patrick. I don't keep in touch as well as I should have, but Patrick gave me that shot. And that's really where college became a non-issue for me, because I started building that experience with the editor title. And I edited magazines, and I did the entire process of collecting, assigning, editing, and pushing off into production all these pieces of content that you see in a magazine. And for better or for worse, I learned the trade by being involved in it. And whereas most people would need a college education, but what that created for me was a level of authenticity that I'm very proud of. So I was not going to write about something that I couldn't perform to some extent. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say I would write a story about maybe a duck calling contest and talk about the results of that, but I'm not going to ever participate in a duck calling contest. So there is a level of understanding something that you can communicate about it. But when I left that job to go freelance, one of my writers, I talked to him, and I should get this tattooed somewhere on my arm or something, but he said, Thomas, the best advice I can give you is never bullshit the hometown crowd. They'll eat you alive. And I like, those are the words he used. And I have never forgotten it, because there is an awful lot. There are numbers, piles, probably to the majority of the people that work in the outdoor space, that if they're in the fishing side, they can't operate a bait caster. They can't run a foot pedal on a trolling motor. They don't even understand how to drive a boat. And then the hunting side of the business, they don't know what it means to sight in a bow versus sighting in a rifle scope, or how, if you dropped any of these people in public property, they'd never find a deer or turkey if their life depended on it. So authenticity is key. You got to be authentic. You got to invest in your relationships. And above all that, you got to work damn hard. If you are not willing to work into the night, through the weekends, to get content produced or to meet a deadline, you're not going to be any good to anybody. So I think that's probably the advice I can give you. And second of all, like, just because you can fish doesn't mean you're a capable writer. Just because you're a capable writer doesn't mean you should write about fishing, So you got to be legitimate. And you and I see eye to eye on this. We've talked about this, Greg. Like, there is a giant lack of authenticity, and it's a growing epidemic in the sport. And I would love it if there are more people that are going to get involved in businesses like mine, Outdoor Sportsman's Group, In-Fisherman, North American Whitetail Game and Fish, Guns and Ammo, that are enthusiasts first and then curators, because we got the cart in front of the horse on a lot of these levels, where these know-nothing types show up, get a job because they've got a degree, a diploma that says they're a writer, an editor. Forget it. You got all kinds of different titles, and then they learn the craft of hunting and fishing. And to me, that's cheap. I don't like that.
That's exactly where I wanted to go next. Is, when I started working with you in 2021, and then now more this year, we've had these conversations, and this happens it's just like typical on a shoot. You're spending long hours in a boat. Oftentimes fishing is a grind. It's just the reality, man. When you watch something on TV or whatever, that's an edited piece. It's cut down to make just the best footage is what you're seeing. But that's a lot of work that goes into that, and a lot of time on the water. So there's a lot of time you're spending with people in a boat, and you really get to know people well, doing fishing shoots. And so we've had these conversations about, we're both really passionate about the industry, and we've complained about things like, it's like, what? It's, there's a lot of, there just is a lot of, mediocrity. Let's put it that way. There's a lot of mediocrity in the fishing industry, and a lot of it can, in my opinion, it is just coming from people that don't have that passion. It's just a job, and they'll do what they got to do, and they're done at the end of the day, wash their hands of it, and it's just a job, and there's not enough people that are really passionate about the sport and know the history of the sport, and are good at the sport, making decisions that can make the sport better. And so that, to me, is frustrating. So say that again.
It's an authenticity issue. You're hitting the nail on the head. When somebody who's not involved in the sport are making decisions at the top of a company that could impact that sport, I have a bit of a problem with that. And it's easy to sit here and take that stance, but the reality is, if you're not invested in the game, why are you even in the business? And I'll tell you why, is because from the outside looking in, if you're semi-interested in outdoor sports, there's a certain level of badassery that comes along with being a successful whitetail hunter. There's a certain level of badassery that comes along with being a successful muskie fisherman or bass fisherman, or pick your poison. I don't care what it is. There's an element that people admire. And social media has created this need for us to be admired. We have to create our own make-believe world on social media and have people compliment us for us to feel good about ourselves, as opposed to just going out and being. Just be yourself and sit in a tree stand, leave your phone at the truck, and just breathe in the cold air. And, I know this is kind of going down a funny road here, but the truth is, if that doesn't motivate you to get out, then why are you going? And the answer is for pics for the gram. Okay. We know that whenever you post something, and I do it too, I'm not above that. I like to brag a little bit. I think that's really why I keep social media around, but I don't need that to enjoy the sport. And I'm sure as shit not doing the sport to make somebody else happy. Like, I'm doing it for me. But social media has taken us down socially some notches, I guess, that cheapen the experience because you get a lot of people that are just out there for the recognition. That bothers me as much as people being in charge of these organizations that have no vested interest in it. And you and I have probably said this to friends, Greg, like, the outdoor business is just different. And how is it different? If I say that and someone wants to confront me and say, how is it different, Thomas? How is it really different? Well, truth be told, based on a not so recent U.S. Fish and Wildlife survey, that if hunting and fishing were businesses, they'd be in the top, I think the top 25 of the Forbes 500 list. Okay. So you're talking tens of 20s of 30s of billions of dollars generated by hunting and fishing every year. So I think that you have a lot of these, I'm going to say it, big city suits that want a piece of that pie. And they went on a deep sea fishing expedition for work one time. So they think that they're anglers and hunters. And you know what? We're just going to buy up the BC and we're just going to, we're going to show these rednecks how to make money. I think there's a lot of that goes on. And I could give you a lot of examples, but I'm not going to because it might hurt somebody's feelings. But that's going on inside of our industry. And I think it's a decay within the industry is we are losing participants, or we're not building enough participants to make business decisions or be involved in these companies down the road. And I think that's a travesty. Don't bullshit the hometown crowd. If you're going to write about it, you're going to sell it, you better dang well know how to do it.
So what do you think? How do we improve that? Like, what is the way to, how do we make that better? Like, do you think that, there's a lot of negative about social media? Let's call it new media, because I don't know. There's legacy media. Let's call this new media, this thing here. Podcasting to me, I think, the nonsense, I'm guilty, of some of the nonsense. I like I've always been into I've been watching fishing shows since I was a little kid. So to me, it's fun to be able to just make content, put it out there for people to enjoy. So it's, there's some real positives to it. Instagram, I've been able to connect with people that it would have been very hard to connect with people without Instagram before. Yeah. So a direct message, I could say, hey, I really enjoy what you're doing. You want to come on the podcast? I think those are real positives. If you can connect passionate people, passionate fishermen together. And I think that's a real positive. And then podcasts, long form, just getting real, having discussions like this on the state of the industry, how it can be improved. Is there anything maybe podcasting is part of it. Maybe new media can be a way that it can be improved upon. I don't know. What are your thoughts? How can this thing be improved?
I don't want my last statements to be construed as dire, as the end is near. That's not what I'm getting at. I just think that there has been a misrepresentation of the perception of successful outdoor angling and hunting, that you have to shoot a big buck to be recognized as a good hunter. You have to catch 25 pounds of bass every time you go fish a tournament. I think what needs to be, I think as a society, as a culture, we've gotten soft. I don't think you disagree with that. To an extent, we've gotten soft, and demanding excellence of yourself is often perceived as you looking down on somebody that doesn't push themselves that hard. And that's not necessarily the case, because if you're demanding excellence out of yourself, you don't have time to worry about what someone else is doing. So you have these people that necessarily don't have the time or desire to really put into mastering a skill in the outdoors. And this could be true for anything. We're just using the outdoors as our pathway here because that's what we're talking about. But you absolutely need to demand nothing short of excellence out of yourself. And I think that being efficient on the water first, and we'll say on the water in the woods, qualifies you to work in the space first, not the other way around. And if you want to have an impact, if you want your passion to be felt by the consumers of your content, by the people that are in your presence, they just feel that you're really ate up with passion for the outdoors. That comes from your time in the field when things weren't going good, but you still kept your chin down and moved forward. That's what separates the best bass anglers from the bass anglers that don't care, or whitetail hunters or elk hunters. Like you got to grin and bear the failures. So I think our society has made, like, they don't want people to fail anymore. And I think the best thing in my career were the mistakes I made. We're embracing the missteps and the realizing I didn't want to break up relationships, because relationships are a big part of this sport. So I think if we're going to make it better, I think we got to, as a general example, we need to focus on time on the water. Because if you want to get good at something, you got to be out there doing it. And that's where you master your craft, if you will, before you present that to somebody else. Because if you haven't mastered your craft, you can't teach someone else how to do it. And that's a fact. And if that hurts anybody's ears out there, I couldn't care less. You need to be good at it before you teach something. And in fact, I was told this, and I don't remember who coined this phrase, but it's something you've probably heard before too, Greg, that you're not good at something until you can teach someone else how to do it. And
yeah, that's a good point.
That to me is what we do. It's outdoor media. We're presenting content, hopefully the next generation or the older generation to continue to go fishing at In-Fisherman. That's our goal, is to inspire them and to educate them. And honestly, I don't have everything figured out. A lot of the segments I've been able to be a part of, there's a whole bunch of stuff behind the scenes that you don't see. You were there, Greg, with some of the stuff that it's barely hanging on by a thread, and we managed to get a segment together. And I think that my tournament experience as a bass tournament fanatic helped me function in those scenarios, because I've always been good at spinning out. If there's one weakness I have, is if the fishing gets tough, I have a tendency to be like, man, I wish I was at home doing something else. Or, if the fish aren't biting, man, there ain't no way to make them bite. Screw this. I'm getting off the water. Like I have a tendency to spin out. Well, if we're on a trip at Sam Rayburn trying to film a bass segment for In-Fisherman TV, we've spent thousands of dollars to get there, to eat, to have a hotel, and we don't get a segment, like, that's a real kick in the butt. That hurts. You have wasted money at that point. So if you have that tournament mindset of, this can change in a cast, and keep making the next flip, keep moving the boat forward, try the next spot, you got to be tenacious. You said that. You got to have a tenacity that embraces failure but refuses to quit. And you have to make that failure a positive thing. I don't know what level of media I'll be involved in next year, 10 years from now. Maybe none of it. I don't know. But what I do know is that I would not have gotten here if it weren't for the authentic people I met along the way, the relationships that I built. My passion for the outdoors continued to grow. And then above all that, like, you got to embrace the suck. You got to be on the water, and you got to embrace the suck. And I said this early on here, like, you do run the risk of burning out your passion. If that is a risk, then working in the outdoor space is probably not for you. It's done the opposite for me, Greg. It's made me more passionate about fishing. It's made me more passionate about hunting. And I think along the way, my passion has shifted from the sports themselves to really the people I work with and the people I get to know, and watching. Again, he's my son. I'm proud of both my kids immensely. But watching my son become a bass angler that I want to fish with as a grown adult. I mean, he's 17. I fished my first bass tournament when I was 17, and he's fished 150 by now.
Right on.
So, like, that's what, that's why I get out of this, is seeing that passion pass on to the next generation. And I guess I'm selfish. I guess seeing my son become successful isn't enough. I want to keep seeing that with other people's kids. I want to see those smiles get better. I got a text from a buddy here. I'm going to read this to you. So Tommy's fishing partner, my son's fishing partner, has been bow hunting for a couple of years, and he's had a hard time. Minnesota's not the best place to bow hunt, but he sent me a picture of his first deer. Jed, I'm giving you a high five here, bro. This is Jed's first deer. Shot it this last week. See, I'm getting trail camera pictures right there. So I can't concentrate on anything right now. Here's the thing. He never apologized for this deer, and I'm glad he did not. But he sent me a text, and we're busy. We don't see each other nearly as much during the off season, but he said, just wanted to say thank you for getting me into bow hunting and all the time you put into getting me ready. I had a blast with the ups and downs of it, and I'm looking forward to many more years of it. That is why I do what I do. That is what gets me out of bed in the morning. And if it's muskie fishing, perch fishing, turkey hunting, pheasant hunting, I could give a rip. If it gets you out of bed in the morning and you move past the mistakes, you move past the failure to get good at this stuff, it's worth every minute. And if being a professional is an ultimate goal someday, maybe that means college, maybe it doesn't, but it has to be on your list, and you got to keep moving forward even when the times get tough. So I'm preaching, and I'm sorry about that, Greg, but this is something I care a lot about. So
no, I love it. And the thing is too, yeah, that's awesome that you did that for him. And just that passing along that passion, like I seeing young people, I always just get a kick out of seeing little kids riding down the dirt road in front of my house, with fishing rods in tow, and they're going fishing somewhere, like just to see kids eating up with fishing, and then helping instill that and foster that. And you're doing that with fishing and whitetail hunting. I'm sure you're doing it with turkey hunting. I've said this a number of times, but I feel very fortunate just to have a passion for fishing. Some people
I don't know how people live without it.
Yeah, I mean, there's it's something that if you have that, don't take it for granted. Like it's something that it's a motivator to get you up in the morning. It's something to look forward to. And then if you're if the outdoors can get you so fired up, I speak on the fishing side of things. I mean, I remember as a young kid, it was just like, it was the only way to explain it. It was just magic. I just, when I would get on a body of water, was just, and so if a kid doesn't even know that could be in the cards for him or her, and you could go, have you ever thought about doing this? Or just do something like even making a video, and somehow they see it and they go, oh, I might try that. And then they feel their first bite, and then they catch their first fish, and then it's like it can just spin off from there. That's what's exciting. In regards to the fishing industry and people being in positions, one of the things that's been frustrating for me in the fishing industry, and it kind of goes back to how you're talking about the person put the wrong species, it put a pike in a muskie article. There's too many people still in high positions, of power, or just not power necessarily. Sometimes it is positions of power, but just, in top positions, there's not enough people that really know fishing, that are making decisions and making important decisions. There's still not enough passionate people that know fishing that are in those positions. That's what's been really frustrating for me. Like, even going from college to Bass Pro Shops, I'd be like, I can't believe this person's in this position. They don't even know fishing. They have no idea. So
it's an epidemic.
Yeah,
it really
is. It's way more common than people might realize. And so if you're passionate about fishing, and you're eating up with it, when I was a little kid, I first wanted to be a pro fisherman. Then I want to be like the Lindners, and then I wanted to be like Rick Clunn. I wanted to be a pro bass fisherman. But of the fact that if you're passionate about it, try to get yourself into the industry one way or another. Whether if you can't do it as the whole thing is, it's very, very difficult. Like, you're just seeing all the glitz and glamour that's promoted to you about what it's like to be a pro fisherman, okay? I know the reality of it. It is very, very hard, okay? I'm right in it, It's very, very hard. That does not mean that you can't have a fantastic life, immersed in fishing. That's not being a professional fishing. Like what I'm doing, what Thomas is doing is super, super important. We need more passionate people in the industries, in the fishing industry, that know and care and are going to be able to make better decisions than someone that's never had that passion. So hopefully there's more youth, and this will, with incoming generations, it'll get better. But you need, like our sport, I feel like is kind of doesn't have what more mainstream, I hate to say that, there's more people, I think, in like golf and more of these mainstream sports. There's probably more people making top decisions in those sports that really know what the hell's going on, as opposed to fishing. There's a lot of like people that have no clue in fishing making important decisions. That's what's been particularly frustrating in my career. And obviously it sounds like you feel the same way.
Yeah, I think it comes down to motivation, and I want that to get checked before a career path is really nailed down for somebody. And it's not to say you need to hold yourself back, but there's just a lot of people that want to. I have no problem going to an outfitter and paying for a hunt, or going on a fishing trip at Tazin Lake Lodge, which was amazing. And I have no problem with to have that experience where you have a guide in the boat. But let's be clear. If there is a guide in your boat or in a boat driving you around and putting you on fish, that guide is responsible for those fish. So I would say don't represent that you're a fishing expert if you're only going on guided fishing trips. Now, have fun for sure, but it's the post-experience representation thing, I believe, that motivates a lot of these people to come into this industry without any experience. They like the opportunity to be high-fived by their buddies because of this big deer they have on their wall, because their buddies don't know that you just went to a high fence ranch and shot a 230-inch whitetail off of a feeder. Are those people the enemy? No, we're on the same team, but it's the post-experience representation that I think needs to get checked. It needs to be, that's a great big deer, but I shot that in a high fence. I paid a lot of money to have that deer on my wall. At least you're being honest about it then. Or I went to a private lake in Texas and, caught a 14-pound bass at somebody else's fish feeder. Like there are details of the story that need to be included. But what I mentioned the hunting public a while ago, because their level of authenticity in the hunting world is unmatched. I don't know that there's very many other organizations that can kind of fit the bill. Now, I love the Drurys. I grew up on the Drurys and the Primos crew and the Real Hunting, or Real Tree team, Michael Waddell and David Blanton and that whole crew. Those guys were authentic, and they presented hunting in an authentic manner. But still, in my experience, I've filmed at Pike County, Illinois. I've filmed in Iowa. I've been to some of the greatest whitetail places in the country to roll a camera. When I'm sharing camp with other guys that have some level of ego because they have money, but they're hunting on a property, they're being led to a tree stand by a guide, and they didn't do any of the work to get there. And I really feel like that work that leads you up to that success is what separates the wannabes from the authentic people. And when you sit down and start talking with somebody, this is the thing that is overlooked. Those of us that are legitimate, I am patting myself on the back here. Those of us that are legitimate can sniff out a fake in a second. Like, when they paid to go on hunts or only paid to go on fishing trips, and they don't own a boat, or they might have a handful of rods and reels, but it's got the same line on it that it's had for 6 years. When MD Johnson, I'll quote MD again, when he gave me that line about being authentic and not lying to the hometown crowd, that's true across this entire industry, outdoors. I don't care if it's hunting or fishing. If you're an authentic, self-made or student of a particular game, and whatever, pick your passion. For me, I live for bass tournaments, muskie fishing, whitetails, and turkeys. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. But for you, it might be something different, Greg. For Doug Stange, it's something different. For Rob Newman, it's something different. For Todd Seisner, it's something different. As long as you're being authentic in that space and you are earning the credibility that you want to be given when you're successful, then I don't have a problem with a little bit of ego or whatever. It's I paid money to have this deer, I paid money to have this fish, and I'm going to tell all my buddies I did it myself. That's a raw way of saying that's kind of cheating, but that's kind of what social media, or new media, as you put it, has put us in position for. That, we have a place to brag where nobody knows the details that went into that event.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, there's no accountability.
Yeah.
I don't want to take away from those experiences, so don't get me wrong. I've been on a guided hunt. It was a great time. I would do it again. I've been on guided fishing trips. It's awesome. But I've also been on the other side of that, where I've guided turkey hunters, I've guided deer hunters, I've guided fishermen. So I understand how that works. It's just we've gone so far into this, I want to be recognized as somebody that's good at this, without having to put in the time on the water, like I said earlier, to become proficient and having mastered your craft to be an educator. So what I want for this industry is more authentic, passionate people, just like you. People that are going to say no to a guided hunt or a guided fishing trip because they're doing their own thing on the water in the woods that weekend. That's going to bring in a generation of killers, and I'm using that term in a good way, of authentic people that when they launch their boat, everybody's like, oh man, that guy's here. We're donating money this week, or whatever the case may be. Just be real. That's what I'm getting at. The bottom line with all this, be real, and don't leave out the details of the story.
Totally.
That are an important part of the story to make yourself look better. Tell the full story.
Yeah.
I don't.
That's a great point.
Be honest, right?
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And as a writer, you understand that it's all about storytelling.
Well, now I say that, and as a writer, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got for that is don't ever let the facts get in the way of a good story.
Well, there's that too. That's true. But to me, to me, it's all about storytelling. And this actually gets into the next topic. We're going to get a little controversial here, probably.
That's all right.
I got into bass fishing. We're both bass fishermen, and what got me into bass fishing. So first, I was a multi-species angler, and a lot of that is I thank In-Fisherman. I thank In-Fisherman for that. And then I remember very young, I was in a tackle shop, and I saw like a flyer or like a pamphlets or something for like the Bassmasters. I'm like, the Bassmasters? What the hell is this? So I picked it up. I'm like, oh, it's a TV show. Oh, it's a competition. And then it just, my whole world blew up from that, and I learned about the Bassmasters television show. I became addicted to it, watching it every Sunday on the Nashville network. And it was done. The producer was a man, he's actually right here, that right there. Right there. That's Bob Cobb. It's a signed picture of Bob Cobb right there. He was the producer of the Bassmasters back in the day. And this is very important, he was a writer first. He was a writer. He was a journalist at, I believe, down in Tulsa. I cannot remember the newspaper, but he knew how to weave a story. He knew how to tell a tale. And he would do that in that show. And I mean, he would set up the fishery as this, like this mythical, he just did a great job just describing and raising up, building up these fisheries. And then he did the same thing with the anglers. Everything was dramatic. He just was such a great storyteller. And that really then made me spin off into wanting to be a professional bass fisherman. So, my passion for bass fishing really stems from that. And still to this day, now I am not I am not as crazed as I was when I was 16, 17 years old, about competitive bass fishing. I still really enjoy it, but I still have that care for the industry. I still want it to become more. I still believe that it has all the elements for it to become more. And it frustrates me because in 2024, I would have never suspected that we would be backsliding. The sport is backsliding to me, in my opinion. I thought that we'd be much better off. I've said this before. I don't know that at where we are right now that we can have all of these organizations just duking it out. I'm not sure it can sustain it, and at least to a point where we can, these organizations have enough to really make it. They're just beating each other up too much, I feel like, for one of them to kind of just take the lead and do something and really do. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but I feel like instead of moving forward the sport of bass fishing, I'm not talking about organizations. I have been affiliated with Major League Fishing for many years. They've been fantastic to me. In many respects, I think what they're doing is really, really great. I love the score tracker. I love just the fact that all the anglers know how everybody else is doing. They've done a lot of very, very innovative things. But that being said, it's just like, what has happened? I don't. It's frustrating to me. A guy that I'm just passionate, about fishing just in general. But I don't have that real crazy fire that I did when I was 17. But I still care about it, and I want the sport and I want the participants to do as well as they can. I do also believe, though, that part of the problem in professional bass fishing is that kind of like, everybody thinks they can do it because you don't have to be an Adonis, like this crazy, like you don't have to be an elite athlete, the physicality, anybody can really do it. Like as far as, the physicality of it, and I guess what I'm trying to say more than anything here is that I know we've talked about this in the boat. I know you're passionate about it. And I guess I wanted to just get your thoughts on what you think. Where do you think we are with in the sport just in general? And how do you think it can be improved, if it can be improved?
Well, I think there's a little backstory here probably before I get into some of those opinions. I fished my first tournament when I was a junior in high school, and it was a paper tournament, and I'm sure everybody was cheating, rounding everything.
Oh yeah, the good old paper tournaments.
Back in the day when that was a thing, and I loved it. And I've fished, good Lord, I don't know how many I've fished over the years, but many tournaments, and I've been a big fan of the competitive angling on the professional level. And like I said earlier, Tommy Scarless kind of pushed me down the path of covering professional walleye tournaments. And I did that for 2 years. Really built a passion for that. And I'll be honest, like I'll stand here and tell you in Fisherman headquarters, like I do not care for walleye fishing. I know that we're in the heart of it here in Minnesota.
Blasphemous. That's blasphemy. Yeah. I can't believe you're saying that. Oh my goodness. It's the hardest fish to catch. They're impossible to catch. And you have to use very flimsy rods. They bite so delicately. Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.
No. I mean, in the right circumstances, I don't mind them. But the walleye competitive world competitive walleye world is a very competitive area. So there's, I kind of got into that. I was starting to pick up on an element of drama that existed in the hunting world, and one of the things that always bothered me, it was that authenticity thing, is that you could inherit 500 acres from your grandfather. Pick up a video camera and take your hot girlfriend out and film her shooting a deer, and all of a sudden you're a widely recognized national expert in the whitetail area. and that bothered me a little bit because I know that's just not that. I mean, that's how you're viewed. That's not the truth, though. So you can inadvertently get into that stardom or that success by happenstance. Now, that's not everybody's case. That's an extreme example. But in fishing, what I always found attractive is that it was pure. It was, you got to go catch the best 5 of the day. And if you did, you're going to win. And if you don't catch the best 5, you're going to lose and donate your money. Like there's an element of purity there that there's no room for drama. There's on the water drama. You got 100 type A dudes duking it out for a bass tournament. There's going to be on the water drama, but there's not like industry drama within that, because you have to produce results to be recognized as a good fisherman. And that's something that I really liked about the professional fishing world. Well, move forward in my career. I had an opportunity to, we lived in central Minnesota, had an opportunity to take a job with Bassmaster, and we moved as a family to Birmingham, Alabama. And you want to talk about being out of your element. That was a scary thing. And I spent 5 years there, and there's a lot of probably hours of podcast material we could go through from that. But I'm very, very grateful for that time, because it gave me a detailed inside look at the business. And really it soured a lot of my, there was a long time I thought I wanted to fish professionally. And after having been there, I certainly don't want to do it, and I don't want my son to consider it, because it's a tough lifestyle. And that's not to take away from the anglers that do it, because they're very good. And one thing I learned while I was there, Greg, you said something a minute ago, is that it's, fishing is the kind of sport where physically anybody can do it technically, right? That's not an incorrect statement, because you don't have to be able to run a 4.5 40 and have a 55-inch vertical. You don't need any of that athleticism. But I will tell you, these anglers that fish at these top levels are every bit as athletic as their counterparts in other sports. They have a talent that I do not have. They have an ability to recognize and make adaptations and decisions quickly that I would trip all over. There is an element of professionalism and athleticism that they do possess that is world class, and the best anglers exhibit that in every tournament. And I've seen it in person, and it's like, oh man, just there's not a wasted motion when KVD works his way through the boat. Every single step and direction he looks has a purpose, and his results represent that. So I'm not counteracting what you said. I'm augmenting that a little bit by saying there is absolutely an element of God-given talent that these anglers have that the average person would take years and years, if not ever, be able to develop. So it's an interesting business that once you peek behind the curtain, you're kind of like, I didn't know it worked that way. And remember I said a little bit ago that I liked the fishing option because of the lack of drama.
Right.
Famous last, right? And I was in Birmingham working at Bassmaster when the Major League Fishing thing happened, and I can tell you those are 2 years I would love to have back. Probably teetering on alcoholism because of it, and have PTSD from hours and hours and hours of phone calls and meetings. And it was a tough situation, but that was the drama you didn't anticipate in that sport. And I wouldn't say it burned me out, but it did to an extent make me take a step back and maybe assume a more wholesome perspective of what the sport is. And it is a professional level sport, and people make a living pursuing that. And the trail to the classic is littered with broken hearts and foreclosures and broken marriages and all kinds of stuff. People have to put it all on the line to chase that dream. And we're sitting here encouraging you to consider pursuing a dream, but understand not everybody gets there. And I think professional bass fishing is an example of something that for a long time was pure, was exactly what it appeared to be, and it's morphed into something different. And I don't, there was a time I was very against Major League Fishing and the format. I've since come around. I've fished a couple events that have the score tracker type thing, and it's a good time. I enjoy it. So I don't necessarily dislike the format, but one of the things that I have a hard time with, and this is having spent time in Birmingham at Bassmaster, reading studies and looking at records and understanding that indeed catch and release works. So what I don't like is inside this situation that has developed is there is a created drama of delayed mortality, and that's a whole other topic if you want to get me going. That if you're catching fish, hauling them to a weigh-in, and then releasing them, you're surely going to lose some of those fish, and that's a possibility. But then let's not use hooks. Let's stop using fishing line. Let's stop setting the hook on a bass that eats a jig. Like if we're really worried about fish care and health, then we wouldn't fish for them. And I think that some things are better left as they were. Is Major League Fishing the format that a path forward? I would say it is a path forward. It is an option for perhaps a different format of bass fishing. Is it the path forward that will then put to sleep permanently the live weigh-in format? I don't think so. And I think that there are many opinions that would support that you can catch fish, put them in a live well, haul them around all day, stroke them, pet them, name them, take them to the weigh-in stage, and then drop them back in a lake to be caught another day. That works. And there's 40 years of data at Bassmaster to support that. We get into this, our culture's very all or nothing. Would you agree? Like,
yeah.
We got to have it this way or it's never going to work. Delayed mortality is unacceptable. Well, you really can't prove delayed mortality. Is there a chance that a fish dies and sinks and then decays in the bottom of the lake and we never see it? Yeah, that's a possibility. But many of these fisheries are proven to be self-sustaining fisheries with heavy tournament pressure, especially in the South. So what you see, I think, is there's an increased sensitivity, and this is our culture, an increased sensitivity for critters that's not necessarily needed. If you're going to participate in a blood sport like tournament fishing, and it's proven that you can carry those fish to a weigh-in, put them on a scale, put them back in the lake, and catch those same fish again, which is absolutely fact, has been proven over and over again. It's not up for discussion. Why do we need to change that? That's where the drama occurred. That's where I got kind of, what's the word? Not burned out, but like, come on, we're it's a nothing burger. We're making a problem out of something that's not a problem. And a lot of water under the bridge since those days. And I have good friends that are still anglers at Major League Fishing. I have good friends that are still anglers at Bassmaster. I don't hold any ill feelings for anybody. It was a tough situation to go through that, maybe one day I'll get into all the details of everything that went down, but we don't have time for that here. But what I will say is it offered a different perspective, and it was a chance to step back, look at the sport, understand what it is, understand who it's run by, and that we operate. You said something a minute ago, and this is a true story. This is going to come to fruition soon. We operate in an industry where there are limited funds, there are limited sponsor dollars, and currently there are 3 top level, and I'm using the term top level loosely, professional bass trails. You have the Bassmaster Elite Series, you've got the Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour, and then you've got the NPFL, or the National Professional Fishing League, all of which are self-proclaimed top of the sport type organizations. Well, the reality here, Greg, is there are only so many endemic dollars in the industry, and endemic is a word that means like they're fishing specific brands, like a Strike King or a Berkeley or a Rapala, Abu Garcia, whatever, Yamaha, right? That a non-endemic brand would be Buffalo Wild Wings or GoPro or Apple Computers, whatever. Those are non-endemic brands that may share an interest in the sport and are willing to sponsor on some level these organizations. So that there's money available to some extent, budget dollars available, or marketing dollars available on some of those non-endemics, but you can't rely on them for long term. Because what happens is you have like a GoPro, for example, whose marketing director grew up fishing, loves fishing, wanted to be a part of the Bassmaster world, and was for a long time. A new marketing director comes in that leans a little over the edge of animal rights and says, we have got to be done with this, and completely pulls all out. And that's the cycle, right? You inevitably have new marketing directors for non-endemic organizations that will change how the money is spent and allocated. Okay. Then if you get into the endemic dollars, we have a pretty small business. And that's another piece of advice I received when I was younger. It's like, don't ever burn a bridge, because you never know who you're going to be working with or for. right? And that's the fishing business itself. Is it's amazing how many people bounce around to different companies, and all of a sudden so and so is a vice president or CEO of one of these brands, and it's a good thing you maintained a relationship, right? Because now you can still work together. Whereas if you're burning bridges, you don't get to do that. Well, what's happened in the endemic side of professional fishing, it's been divided up 2.5 ways, not 3, but we'll just say 2.5 ways. So sponsor ABC over here wants to have their product featured in the top levels of competitive bass fishing. They now have to spread that same dollar amount that they had a while ago across 3 different levels of fishing. And the problem becomes they now will pay Bassmaster a lesser amount, but it's equal, right? So everybody's getting the same amount, or it could go the opposite direction, and company HIG is going to only spend with Major League Fishing and not with bass or whatever, and that creates the animosity. And I think that's kind of what you're getting at is, how do we make it better? How do we fix it? People need to get off their high horse. That's part of it. But there's also not room in this business for 3 top-end professional bass trails.
Yeah, I agree with that.
If I were to be honest, I think there's room for 1, if I'm being real honest. But competition is good. And there was, the Bassmaster Elite Series and the FLW Tour, right? There were 2, and that worked for a long time. But I don't know that they would agree with this if they were asked, but FLW was always the B team. That was not, the number 1 tournament in the world was the Bassmaster Classic, which if you've never been, I highly recommend you go. It's one of the greatest shows on earth. It's so much fun. But how do we make it better? I think it kind of goes back to checking egos. Maybe, I think that it comes down to it's okay to be the big fish in a small pond, as opposed to demanding yourself be the big fish in the pond. Like that, I think that we set unrealistic expectations to ourselves, and a lot of these brands and companies, endemically and non-endemically, are doing the same thing. They set an unrealistic expectation of themselves, and anything short of acquiring that goal is complete and utter failure. Shut the doors, fire everybody, start a new business. That's just not the way it needs to be. I think that if everything were to get worked out in a perfect world, and I don't know that this would ever happen. I can't do it. But if someone had $100 million to burn, I think you could probably purchase all 3 tours, create 1 tour that has a place for everybody, and kind of creates a path to the classic. With that's still, keep the classic. It is what it is. It's still the greatest bass fishing show on earth. That's still the number 1 tournament. And then you've got your American League and your National League leading up to that. And again, there's a lot of details I don't know, or would have to sit down.
I agree with that. It's funny that you said that, because I had a conversation 3-4 days ago, American League, National League idea, like baseball. There's a path. And yeah, I agree with you 100%. I don't think there's just not enough food in the trough for everybody to be feeding from. And when you have that situation, you get animosity, which is garbage. We all love fishing. We all love, we love bass fishing. I hate all that stupid stuff. You're not, instead of focusing on just what can we do to make this what can we do to elevate the sport of professional bass fishing to more, will this ever be mainstream? I don't know, man. Maybe that's a pipe dream. I had that as a kid. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I think you're right. It's not mainstream. It's a blood sport. And I think being honest about what it is, that a lot of the guys, when the Major League fishing thing happened, they're like, well, why can't we be more like golf? I'm like, well, Rolex is not going to buy sponsorship with Bassmaster or Major League Fishing because you're poking a hole in a fish, and that will alienate a portion of their base. So it's wise of them not to get involved with it. And, I could care less if people don't like it, right? We're at that point. If you don't like it, don't worry about it. It's not your business. But, you don't have the option to bring in numbers of those non-endemic relationships that are willing to spend money with an organization that is based on a blood sport. So, I think we could sit down, we could sharpen our crayons, get a nice big sheet of paper, and draw up a plan that would satisfy the bass fishing conundrum right now. And here's the thing, and I've thought long and hard about this. I think you have too. If one person or one group were to own the professional bass fishing entities, they would dominate the marketing dollars. So you would have, I don't know what it would cost. Let's just pretend. I think it's probably close, but $100 million would probably buy all 3 trails, maybe. Okay, so you make that investment. How do you ever get that investment back out? Well, I don't know that answer. That's where my Iowa country boy roots come in, and I don't really understand.
We need like an Elon Musk to invest in it and just buy it for $44 billion and doesn't care whether it makes any money or not, but just cares about it enough, right. To go, you know what, 100%. I can lose $100 million. I don't care. I want this thing to be. Is there anybody out there like that? I don't know.
So it's funny you say that. So my next point, now we talked about this a little bit ago about authenticity, right? You want people leading these organizations that have an actual passion or a vested interest in the sport. And I think the only kind of person to do something like that is a previous angler, is just for fun, we'll throw out his name. Let's say Kevin Van Dam retires from competitive fishing, decides to buy up the 3 trails, and as a leader of men, he is, and capable, I think he and his wife together would run a fantastic professional bass fishing organization. And but he has the experience of an angler, so he understands what they're going through. He's more willing to listen to their gripes and make adjustments to the rules to accommodate the sport while keeping the business side of it in mind. You have to have somebody willing to do both, and we've not had that. I don't think an owner or a president or a CEO can participate. That's the other thing. I feel like that person that runs the business cannot be a competitor. That's a conflict of interest in my mind. I think almost everybody would agree with me. On the complete flip side, you can't have daddy giving you a business and hope that you run it right, and literally make countless terrible decision after terrible decision and expect it to live forever. So, and that person has zero idea what it means to launch a boat or what it means to put the right line on a bait caster and flip under overhanging brush. Like, I want a person in charge of any of those brands to be a capable angler first, and then a businessman, maybe it's first or second, but capable of running the business also. It doesn't have to be a man. I'm just using that as the common term here. So, because truth be told, this is the honest to God truth. A lot of the anglers that you and I know today, their business managers are their wives, and they're very good.
So Sherry is like, people don't understand. Like, Sherry Van Dam runs the ship, and she's also the coach. Like, I mean, a prime motivator of Kevin. Mm-hmm. Like, I've heard conversations, like I have, like Kevin mic'd, and I can hear enough, like when he's talking to Sherry in the morning, before he's going out to compete, like, she's coaching him. She's motivating. Yeah. She's like, it's unbelievable. But yeah, you're exactly right.
She's got that skin in the game on the competitive side, right? That's where I think that leadership needs to come from. Is I just don't think gift wrapping a business and giving it to someone and hope they do well is the right thing. You got to find somebody that has the passion, the vested interest, and then the experience to make the decisions to move the company forward. So, this is a dream conversation. I don't see this happening anytime soon, but it really just comes down to what we've talked about is a level of authenticity. And inside the industry, they would feel that authenticity because we all, like I said, we can sniff out a fake 100 miles away. Well, that's taking place currently with current leadership, and people know when it's inauthentic. But when you have an authentic person, I feel like that attracts business in a monumental way, where you have an opportunity. You're gonna bring in the kind of companies that know your reputation, they know your passion, they want to be a part of that, right? That's business in the outdoor space. That is what I want to encourage incoming members of the media, the fishing, hunting, outdoor media or communications, is to be the kind of person that a brand would want to work with, that a magazine would want to publish, that a manufacturer would want to have their product in your hands, because A, you're going to be honest, you're honorable, B, you're going to do what you say and get a review created out on your mediums, and then second of all, you're going to be there when they need you the next time. And I think that's business. I think that more business, Greg, is the people, and the product, whatever it may be, is secondary. And when you can get that cart positioned in front of the horse the right way, all these businesses would thrive. I think that goes from competitive bass fishing. We haven't even talked about competitive walleye fishing. Like, that's a hot mess over there right now. But,
yeah, dude, I couldn't, like, I've been doing more walleye stuff this year, and I'm like, I talked about bass fishing backsliding, and I feel the same way about walleye fishing too. And I grew up watching the PWT, Professional Walleye Tour, or Trail. It was tour or trail, I believe it was trail. But
the name on the front here, but I don't have that memorized.
It's I mean. And this is, I feel, is the case too in bass fishing, but especially in walleye fishing. I see the crowds and I'm like, is there anybody here except just family? I mean, I genuinely care that fishing is in the best shape as possible. So when I make comments like that, it's not from a critical. I'm not saying it to be critical or to be mean. Or I want the best for fishing. I love it so much, and I really love competitive fishing. And I'm like, what are we doing here? I'm like, it's just the people that are showing up or the support, and I'm not seeing. It's just mostly family, and then it's like. It's almost like you're patting yourself on the back. It feels like, instead of it's, and I don't mean. Do you know what I'm saying?
That's one example, but I think that one of the mistakes, and again, I'm not here to be critical of Major League Fishing or critical of bass, but one of the things that I feel deep down in my heart is people come to see the fish. People come to these events, these weigh-ins, to see the fish. I remember the numbers of times that we went to Waddington, New York, on the St. Lawrence River, and some of those other communities up there. That you drive through town and the population's 191, or it's 354, or whatever the number is. Very small communities, and then for some reason, when we have a top-end tournament come through there, the crowds are there's so many people you can't even count them all. Well, I got news for you. They didn't come to see the anglers. They came to see the fish. And that goes back to the point I made about live weigh-ins. It can be done. Is there a risk of damage to fish? Yeah, we've sort of covered that. It's not as likely with the fish care procedures of today, but I think that's one of the missing pieces of Major League Fishing is there's not a tangible fish to look at weigh-in anymore. And that's not broken, so why try to fix it? Now, I say all that knowing that the format was created to work around that, and that it's exciting to be a part of. I'm not taking that away from it, but people like to see fish. People like to look at big brown slimy fish and big green slimy fish, and that's what makes those organizations work, and that creates potential fan engagement, and that's what motivates people to buy trolling motors and lures and rods and reels, and if they're there, then they have an opportunity to interact with a potential sponsor or a boat company or whatever, and the reason they're there is to see the fish. So it's kind of a circle of business, right? You need to bring the people in to sell to them, and what's going to attract them in? Well, the miscalculation is that it was anglers and not the fish, but the reality is it's the fish, not the anglers. Now, the anglers are a cool thing to experience and be around as a byproduct, and naturally that would happen in both cases. However, you want people to come and be a part of that end game ceremony. You got to have a green slimy fish for them to look at.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, when growing up, when I went to the Bassmasters Classic in 94, 95, and it's exciting. I do like seeing fish. I get all that. So That's an important point. I get frustrated that it seems just in general in tournament fishing that the weigh-ins are just it kind of seems just like an afterthought, and it's very, there isn't a lot of new thinking there, I feel like, and I think there's got to be improvements made there. I wanted to ask you, do you think, just particularly with bass fishing, with coverage, television coverage, internet coverage, the live streams, do you think with the 3 trails, do you think, I think I saw this in, I think it was Jay Kumar's Bass Blaster maybe, he was talking about oversaturation. Do you think that there's just maybe too much?
I think so, actually. And I don't think it's just, the MLFs and Bassmasters of the world. I think it's the immediate availability of media on YouTube and social media that, people can get their fix that way. Now, that said, I really enjoy watching these tournaments live. Like when they're both going on, I have those feeds running on my computer, and I'm watching, Gerald Swindle catch a bass or Justin Lucas catch a bass, whatever trail it is. I don't care. I just enjoy fishing. And I think there's probably a real case to be made there about just an oversaturation or overabundance of that type of content, because let's be real, the reason that you and I really got into the space was those videos that In-Fisherman created was an opportunity to live vicariously, to have that experience of Al Linder cranking in that 50+ inch Northern Pike on a bass gear, and curious thing that we were able to do. But because of modern technology and modern media, all of that at an infinite proportion is available at our fingertips and immediately. So the value in the way it's consumed is different because it's not something that we need to have. Whereas all those In-Fisherman tapes that I had were critical to me for learning how to film fishing and learning how to do all this and motivate me to write a story, whatever. That was an important part of my routine, where now all I got to do is just hammer out a title on a YouTube search bar and I get what I want then. And with a bunch of other options. And if you go down the rabbit trail of, catching bass at golf course ponds while you're trespassing, I mean, they're everywhere. So I think that because it's so readily available, it's devalued the trend that was set back in the day. And I don't care for that necessarily, but that is a truth, is we have so much at our fingertips now. We don't have to wait for the next video to come out, or, there's so many tens of bazillions of videos on YouTube that you probably watch something every day for 10 years and not see them all. It's, I think you're right. And I don't know that there's a solution to that.
Yeah.
I think what it's created, though, is more niche specific people that they really pick a path and stick to it. And I think that adds a little value to the multi-species component of In-Fisherman, because to me, the best bass anglers on those trails in those tours were the ones that could catch walleyes at Lake of the Woods, like Jeff Gustafson. There's numbers of anglers that are multi-species anglers, and I think there are cases to be made that they are the better, more well-rounded angler. Then you also have the anglers that only bass fish. They don't bow hunt in the fall. They're in their boat 335 days a year fishing for bass, and they're very, very good at it. So I don't know what's right for you, but I like a little diversity in my life.
Yeah. Me too. I'm much more. Yeah. I like
musky fish. I like catching walleyes sometimes. I like big bluegills. I love, whatever the case may be, catfish. I love catfish. That's one thing. If I can pivot to come to In-Fisherman, to be here now, to do what I'm able to do, and I have reinvigorated my passion for catfishing. That started back on that creek, that Iowa Farm Creek down the road, down a dirt road, a level B road from my house. That reignited my passion. I've had the opportunity to go catch channel cats below the Selkirk Dam in Winnipeg on the Red River. And I've had the opportunity to fish the tail race of Pickwick Dam and catch a 45-pound blue. That's something that outside of here, that passion had been put on the back burner. And so I think there's probably a way to link up our entire conversation with that right there is you kind of, you never forget the one that brung you, right? Remember what turned you into the fanatic you are, and getting back to that, even if it's a little later in life, is extremely satisfying. And I love catching catfish, Greg. You know what? They're
Me
not
too.
as flashy. They're not as pretty. They're not as legendary as a muskie. They don't eat top water. Sometimes might. They're kind of off the beaten path. They're kind of gooey. They're kind of slimy. But I'm going to tell you what, there isn't anything much cooler than a 30-pound channel cat rolling in the current below your boat just outside of Selkirk, Manitoba. There's not much that compares to a 50-pound, 60-pound blue cat peeling 100-pound line off your reel like it's nothing in the lower reaches of the Mississippi River, New Orleans. Like, that now means more to me than it used to. And I think that this drama we've talked about, this changing society of fishing and hunting that has challenged us, like, we can get over that by going back down the creek.
Just go fishing.
Go fishing and remind yourself why you started in the first place. And if you're not chasing a career in the outdoor space and you're still burned out by the modern day fishing society and culture, I get it. We get it. But getting back to what got you out at those very early days, I can't say there's much more satisfaction I've had in recent years than catching big catfish.
Right on, man.
There's some,
It's funny. Yeah, well, I feel the same way. I grew up in southern Minnesota and catching my first channel catfish, reading Doug Stange articles about Otis Toad Smith. Absolutely. I love catfish. I've got great catfish fisheries near me. I couldn't agree more. You've been tremendously gracious with your time. But I before we wrap this up, because we're coming up on 2 hours, this is getting into like Joe Rogan territory here, Thomas. I did.
Sorry, you turned me on. I go, sometimes I stop.
No, I wanted to tell. So you're podcasting. To me, this new media, one of the most wonderful things. I've always loved radio. You have a great radio voice, by the way. You're a great communicator. You're gonna be I see big things with the podcast that you're working on. Just go into that. Talk about the podcast you're doing. I saw the set yesterday. The furniture is awesome. It's just I love everything you're doing there. The backdrop you have of the In-Fisherman history. Tell me what's going on with your podcast.
Well, it's In-Fisherman storyline is what we call it, and there is I don't know if I can grab it. Probably not. So there was a whole bunch of In-Fisherman radio masters that I found in a closet here, and there was a day where I think they had I think it was a 3 or 5 minute, 7 minute, I don't know exactly, syndicated radio short that, they'd pick one topic and it would be relevant to a region. So they'd send something to Southern California that would play in Phoenix, and it'd play in Salt Lake City, and it'd play in Northern California, whatever, and then there'd be something for the Great Lakes up in Cleveland, and then there'd be something in Florida and Virginia. You get where I'm going. Like they'd cut 8 or 9 of these different regional In-Fisherman shorts, and they would syndicate them across hundreds of channels across the country. And I found these masters, and I'm like, man, I gotta find these. And there's an old tape deck right here you can't see on the camera that you can plug these tapes in and they still play. I mean, and of course, I shouldn't be surprised. I mean, it's not like it was that long ago. You and I were listening to cassette tapes, right?
Well, that tape, gets pretty brittle, it's as it ages. Yeah. I mean, I hear you.
So I put one in, and Doug was walking through. I said, hey, come listen to this. And it was 1987. Okay.
Oh, that was a special year for me, man.
I was 6. So on that tape is Dave Sanda talking about tube rigging. And I mean, there was a couple of things he mentioned, and Doug heard it, and he lit up and talked for 10 minutes about those early days of soft plastics and how bass, for some reason, after studies had determined bass prefer crop patterns without the claws, which naturally brought in the value of a tube and the different ways you could rig it. And Doug is undeniably a tube fan. He loves using those for catching largemouth and smallmouth, and they still work. And you'll see one segment every year on In-Fisherman TV where he's talking about a tube and its application. So that right there, it's like, oh my gosh, like there's a treasure trove of knowledge here and experiences and stories that you and I have kind of rehashed a little bit here in the last hour and a half about how In-Fisherman inspired us. Well, there's a lot of stories inside Doug's cranium that I would like to get out. And he's 75. Our 50th anniversary is in 2025. So, and you know, when I say our, like I'm just a part of this right now. I was not a part of the In-Fisherman origin. So I think that there is a extended podcast process that I am going to engage in, and I'm going to try to tell the In-Fisherman story in a biographical manner. And I've spoken with Al Linder. I've spoken with our leadership. We're going to try, and this is still working on getting this to happen. Everybody's agreed to it, but getting people to sit down is another process all of its own. I want everybody that was involved to tell their story and share. Let me back up and say this. There's been some big names in this industry that left us too soon. Tommy Scarlett, talked about him, gone too soon. Ron Linder, I think he was in his 90s, gone too soon, but his legacy kind of went with a couple, 3-4 paragraphs. And I've often looked at that and been like, damn, it just wasn't enough.
Yeah,
you know, there's so much more about Ron. I
just want to say you broke up there a little bit. What you said is that there should have been more with Ron Lindner when he passed away. There should have been more.
There should have been more. Yeah, and that's right. And so what my goal is with this podcast is to get these stories recorded in a easily consumable modern fashion of a podcast, which I love. I love podcasts. I listen to them all the time. But in their own voice. You know, if you were to read a book, a biography about Al and Ron Linder, you don't get their voices. You don't get the experience, their vernacular, the way they talk, you know, with that thick Chicago accent, you know, to Wisconsin. And, you know, I want them to sit down and share those stories. I want Doug to give me a 5 or 6 multi-part series about his life and the ups and downs, and how he got to where he's at. And then, you know, there was a time, you probably went through this about the same time I did, Greg, is when In-Fisherman was sold. Like I knew something had happened, but I wasn't involved in the industry to understand it. But I knew, like, oh, the Linders are gone. Like, I'm not doing this anymore. They're the reason I watched it. Well, there's a story that needs to be told there that includes our current CEO of Outdoor Sportsman Group, Mike Carney, was brought in as the first publisher here post Linders. And so he had a very tall order of how to move forward beyond that time, how to keep In-Fisherman profitable, how to keep it a household name. And he's the guy that did that. And he's been very, very loyal to this brand. He's been loyal to this parent company as he's climbed his way up into the ranks, and is now our CEO. So there is absolutely stories that I want to get out and get on tape, and I want to get it recorded, and I wanted to publish it through this podcast. So I don't know how it's all going to happen. Like I've been given verbal commitments, but it's another thing to actually get someone to sit down to record 4 2-hour segments, right? Like that's a big commitment, but it's going to take that to get the whole story. So the In-Fisherman storyline is that, but it's also taking the podcast kid on the road and going to Andy Meyer's Lodge. It's taking, sitting down with one of the most fascinating guys, John Bondi, who created the Bondi bait, lives in Windsor, Canada, which is right across the river from Detroit. And you want to talk about a cool story? Like, listen to that podcast. I mean, I listened to it after it was published because he is an absolutely fascinating guy. And there's so many stories out there like that, Greg, that I want In-Fisherman storyline to be. I don't like coattailing people, so forgive me for saying this, but I can't think of a better way to say it. But I want this podcast, well, this is your podcast, but I wanted Fisherman Storyline to become a lot like the Joe Rogan Experience in the fishing space, and do those deep dives, get into those deeply personal stories that affected a guy like you when you were younger, that affected a guy like me, and talk about our frustrations with an evolving industry, but also understanding that there is a solution at the end of the day, and not just a 45-minute canned interview. That's what I don't want. What I want is the full story, and so that's what I'm hoping for.
Well, you want authenticity. You want to get real. You want to like just get the real meat of the story. None of the fluff. Like so much of let's call it still mainstream media. It's really legacy media now. Whatever. It's a lot of it's just fabricated. Yeah. And so that I think that's why podcasts are doing so well, is that just the fact that we've had we're at past 2 hours here. You can go into more deep dives, get to know topics better, get to know people better, how they really are. I mean, just look at how Trump was doing so many podcasts, and Kamala. I don't know if she was doing Trump knew, his team knew how important podcasts have become, so that you can really get to know someone. So I am
I think that's it. I think you nailed it right there, is that you have an opportunity to get to know somebody in a raw format, an authentic format. And if I'll be honest, Greg, my intention was never to be on TV. I didn't intend for that. That wasn't my end game. It wasn't my end goal. It kind of, if I look back at what I worked to accomplish, it's a little bit less of a surprise if I consider all that stuff. But to be totally honest with you, I also don't ever want to be viewed as anything but authentic. And so if this podcast or In-Fisherman Storyline or doing something with anybody, I've got a list of friends that run podcasts too, and I love talking with them about stuff. If it gives you an opportunity to know me better, so you can look past my ugly face when it's on TV, that's what I want. So sometimes TV.
Yeah. So what do you think? What do you think the future is of fishing media? What do you is you're right there. I mean, In-Fisherman, communications has been for freshwater fishing. I mean, come on, it's been at the forefront. Television, radio. I don't know how. I knew In-Fisherman. Does In-Fisherman still have In-Fisherman radio? Is that still going on at all?
We actually have a studio, and it's a small little room here in this building. But I sweat like a fat kid at a free dance, so I don't go in there.
Right. So
this open room definitely helps me breathe. But there was a radio program to this, and I think that we're probably past that point where terrestrial radio is fun and it's got its place, but I don't think that's where we're going to invest our time. And you look at the future of In-Fisherman television. TV is rapidly changing with streaming services, and cable is becoming a thing of the past. Terrestrial TV is a thing of the past. You have Starlink now that can deliver anything anywhere. So I feel like you get into we have an app called MOTV that's actually growing leaps and bounds. It's like a YouTube, if you will, of hunting and fishing shows. But don't take that as exactly those words, because it's not a resource like YouTube is, because a lot of the stuff you'll find on MOTV, you'll also find on YouTube. YouTube to me is more of a search engine. The subscription service that exists with MOTV is largely created to offer all the shows that you find on the Outdoor Channel archived, right? So Zona's Awesome Fishing Show and previous episodes of Major League Fishing and North Whitetail and there's Fisherman and so on and so forth. Many, many shows that are on there. And you can go back and watch the last 20 seasons of In-Fisherman TV. So it kind of functions as an archiving subscription service. But that seems to be the future. And if you look at, the way we shoot television today, as you've seen with, a couple shoots you and I have been on and some of the other projects we've worked on together, people are wanting more immediate content. So if I had to guess, I would say that we're going to probably continue to produce our television show at a similar fashion, but also create something as a sideline that's more immediate. And perhaps it's perhaps it's a day added onto a trip somewhere, and that day we're going to stream it live, much like what you've done with your camera at Major League Fishing and what Bassmaster does to stream that stuff live. So there may be a live component to it. I could see that being a something new, but the future of the business, future of the industry, we're at a funny time, Greg. We're at a time now where the generation that founded all this, the Al's and the Rons, the there are blank. We've been talking different names of people that founded these organizations like Bassmaster and the Bob Cobbs of the world. Like that generation is retiring or dying out. And so the next generation's coming in. That's us. That's taking the helm of these organizations. And whether that's millennial or Gen X, like we're about to have our opportunity to have an impact on the sport that we love and how it's shared. So I hope that with what we've talked about, that kind of stuff is in the minds of this new and younger leadership coming in, that their goal is to present authentic content. And however it's presented or made accessible, I guess that's to be determined, but I want it to be authentic. And I want them to want that. I want anybody that's consuming content to not be impressed by cheap thrills and gimmicks, but look for authenticity. And based on what we've seen happen in our country over the last 4 years, we don't need to get political here, but let's be honest. Like, I think people want authenticity, period, not just in hunting and fishing. And sometimes authenticity hurts feelings. Sometimes authenticity says stuff it shouldn't. That doesn't mean that the end product isn't what we're all after. And I think that in fishing and hunting is where we're headed. We're going to demand and require authentic content. That's what my prayer is. That's what I hope happens, because bro, I give a damn about this sport in a big way, and I care about the people inside of it. And I want my kids to have that in front of them and available to them too, so that they can become good enough to teach their kids to go. So I guess my goal in this business is to leave a mark of authenticity without a need to be a star. I don't want to be a star. I just want to be a guy that gets one of my son's buddies in a tree stand, or gets my daughter on the fish of a lifetime. That is the motivation and inspiration I want to pass on, because it's worth sharing all of this stuff we talked about, and you don't have someone to share a story with. Am I right?
Absolutely. No, it's that's why I love doing podcasts too, because we're sharing stories. It's just we're downloading, uploading information, humans uploading and downloading information with each other, and bettering each other, learning from each other. It's fantastic. And we're having conversations now. Everything's, you can be real negative about stuff and the way things going on in the world right now. And there is a lot to be positive about, People are able to make connections much easier in many respects. It's not, the internet isn't all about like disconnecting people. In many ways, it can really bring people together. I'm talking with fishermen. I'm, just talking with you now, but just connecting. I'm able to connect with people that I would never have been able to connect with without social media. So I think there's a lot of positives. I think there's a lot to look forward to, and we just, like we were talking about earlier, the more passionate people we have at the helm, this thing's going to be in better shape. I love that you said that the print media is doing well, for In-Fisherman. So
Right, but it's true.
Yeah, like I've just bought a In-Fisherman. I got I've got just the regular magazine, that comes out, but then I have the ice, the special ice edition that comes out. So I still like that physical copy. You know what I mean? There's something really to that.
I don't know that ever goes away. I watch how my kids are consuming media, and I don't see Tommy, my son, picking up a book very often, but my daughter does. And I have seen him read some magazines. So I think that as humans, we want something tangible, and we appreciate art. And that, these magazines are art to me. There's a lot of talent that goes into taking the photos and writing the words and laying them out and putting together the final copy. And, I think we want something tangible. And let's be honest, like, I do a lot of good reading on the toilet, and I'd prefer to have pages. Not
Well, it's funny you should say that, because the notes I took for this podcast were all anyway.
I'm glad to know you thought of them. Anyways,
that sounded wrong, but it's anyway. We should probably end it on a more positive note. So I'm going to say, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here a little bit. Okay, you are at the epicenter of freshwater fishing there. Okay, you're In-Fisherman, Brainerd, Minnesota. The amount of history there. I mean, I go up there, and it's like I was saying this on the last podcast. I was like, it's just like it's invigorating. It's like this weird kind of like, it's sort of like if you were a Disney fan or something, and you go to Disneyland or you go to Disney World. Brainerd to me feels like that when I'm up there. And so you're right there, and you've got you've got your ear to the ground of the multi-species freshwater fishing world. Is there anything you're hearing as far as like trends? Is there something that we should know about? Is there something that people should be doing? Or is there something that's coming down the pike? What's kind of something that, I don't know, that's kind of like, I hate to say trendy, but it's like something you think's cool that's kind of happening right now in the fishing world?
Well, I'll tell you something that I do think is cool, and I think that it could have its negative impacts, but the high school fishing thing is something I've really enjoyed. My son participates, and he's got a partner. I told you about him, Jed, the young man that shot that deer. And I think that's a great thing. I think that it needs to be managed so that it doesn't get too big too quickly for the sake of the fish. It's definitely providing an opportunity for I guess kids to get experience, and if they do have a dream to be somebody, to be something, in the professional angling world, like it's going to help you pave that way. And I think I'll tell you this much: if I had it in high school, I might have had better grades. That's a true story. But I think that's a cool development in and of itself. But I think that with the one thing we didn't talk about, we don't got time today, I don't think, but the advent of forward-facing sonar and $120,000 boats and all that kind of makes you take a step back, shake your head like, I don't know how anybody affords all that stuff. And I think that what it's done, this is a positive impact to all that, is it has really pushed people back to their catching catfish out of the creek thing, back to their roots, and realizing that you can be effective from any kind of boat. You can be effective without forward-facing sonar. If you want to use it, use it. If you don't. The beauty of this sport, and this is, I think, what I want everyone to take home here is you can do it as long as it's legal, right? We're not throwing dynamite in the water to float your limit of walleyes here, but if it makes you happy, then you're doing it right. And I think that if you can afford a $120,000 boat, more power to you. You're going to get there faster. That doesn't mean you're going to beat me. However, the beauty of the sport is all the way up to the top levels of competition. It's a participation-based sport. And that means the fans of the professional fishing are among the greatest fans in the world because they do it on their own time as well, right? Golf is similar. There's a little similarities there, but this sport allows you to be you. And I think you have opportunities now in high school and college to try the competition thing out. There's more clubs than ever before, where if you want to fish something locally, walleye or bass or multi-species, you can do that. And so I think that what we need to do, we need to work on collectively as industry professionals, but also as fathers and uncles and mothers and parents and brothers and sisters and all that stuff, is to focus on why we're going in the first place, and to remember that that's what needs to get you out there every single time, not to post a picture on social media, not to brag your buddies. That's a byproduct, and that's cool. And there's nothing wrong with that in and of itself, but understand the reason you're out there is fresh air, is to compete with Mother Nature, is to experience something that you and I both have agreed upon this in the show already, that it's amazing more people don't do it. I don't understand it, but I'm also not mad that not everybody does it, because I don't want all our boat ramps filled up and public lands filled with people. But you know what? If you want to live, spend time outside with people you love. That to me is the epicenter of why I got into this business. And it's afforded me the opportunity to meet a lot of great people, to experience a lot of super cool things with those great people. And then, when I go to bed at night, I sleep easy knowing I made memories, and I've shared a lot of that with my family. So what's good right now? What's trendy? It's still cool to do what you want to do. And I think that's kind of in conflict with a lot of what we hear about on the media today and whatever. It's cool to be you. Do you, boo, right? That's what I'm saying.
I think that was very, very well said. And we are cut from the same cloth, my friend. That's why it's been such a pleasure to be in the boat with you. Yeah. It's always just when you connect with someone, you meet someone that has such a kind of a similar background, similar philosophy on life, similar passion. I don't take it for granted anymore. You get enough years under your belt and you're like, you know what, this is really something special, and I'm going to appreciate this, and I'm going to just kind of just think to myself, boy, I am a very, very lucky person, because it's not often you meet someone that's you click with. As well as we click.
If I haven't pissed you off yet, we haven't spent enough time together.
I'm sure it will happen. You said earlier that we you have a temper. My wife will tell you that I can get a little testy. I have I'm not proud of it. But that's fine. But that's part of passion. That's part of being a passionate person. I really feel like so.
What I will promise you, Greg, is when we do butt heads. And it will probably happen at some point if we spend more time filming together. It is not intentional, and it's often me spinning out, like I was telling you about earlier. So if I can hold myself together like an adult and do what I was out there to do, we should be all right. But yeah, that's just a part of it. I guess when you get older, you get better at keeping yourself under control. I'm still learning that. So.
I am as well, my friend. Thomas, I hope we get to be in a boat together soon. I really appreciate you doing this podcast. You've been awesome with your time. I've really enjoyed it. I knew this was going to be great because I knew we had a lot to discuss and be opinionated, about. So, but yeah, I love doing these, especially with people like yourself. That it just comes very naturally. It's very easy to have conversations like this. So.
Well, it's my pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, I love running my mouth. So these are a lot of fun. I'll do them anytime. Happy to share my opinion. And hey, just for anybody listening, these are just my opinions, not necessarily those representative of the companies I work with or for. So just to get that disclaimer out there.
The same goes for me as well. But yeah, appreciate it, Thomas. And have a. You're probably going out whitetail hunting soon. So. Good luck with that. I wish you all the best.
I appreciate it. Yep, appreciate you.
Take care, brother.